The San Francisco skyline glittered like a necklace of light against the Pacific night. From the 52nd floor of Hamoa Tower, Ethan Cole could see everything: the Bay Bridge strung with pearls of traffic, Market Street buzzing even past midnight, the restless hum of a city that never truly slept. But inside his office, silence pressed in. Ethan stood by the window, broad-shouldered in a tailored charcoal suit, the glow of the city reflecting off his sharp profile. Behind him, on the long walnut conference table, his MacBook spilled blue light into the room. On the screen, leaked emails, confidential files. The merger strategy that had taken 18 months to craft exposed to the press in a matter of hours, billions of dollars, months of negotiations, all compromised. He clenched his jaw. Only 3 people in the entire company had access to those documents, and one of them had just sold him out. The door opened with a muted click. Ryan Blake, his chief of staff, slipped in, carrying a paper cup from Blue Bottle Coffee, the only brand Ethan would tolerate. "Double espresso," Ryan said quietly. Setting it down, "I've had it sweep every system, all passwords reset. We've doubled firewalls, my guess. Someone hacked the partner's servers." Ethan didn't move, didn't even glance at the coffee. He turned slowly, his eyes darker than the night behind him. He swiveled the MacBook toward Ryan. On the glowing screen, a logo appeared in bold white letters, Arcton Group, and beneath it, the sender's name, Samantha Vance, Chief Strategy Officer. Ryan froze. "You think it's her?" The name tasted bitter in Ethan's mind. Samantha, the woman who had once been everything, the woman who had walked out on him 3 years ago without explanation, leaving only a single text message, "Don't look for me." He had told himself he didn't care, that he didn't need her, that the only love worth having was power, and he had built an empire to prove it. And now she was back, not as an ally, not as the woman who had once shared his bed and his dreams, but as his rival, his enemy. Voice was low, razor-sharp, locked down access to the entire strategic floor. "From this moment, every classified file gets printed in duplicate. 1 copy to me." His eyes cut across the room, pinning Ryan in place. "The other copy to you." Ryan swallowed, understood. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice. Slicing through the silence, Ethan picked up a Mont Blanc pen, spinning it slowly between his fingers. His gaze drifted back to the city, but his mind was elsewhere, on a woman with steel in her eyes and secrets in her smile. A betrayal had cracked his empire, and Ethan Cole knew one thing for certain: the traitor wasn't far away. The traitor was close, too close, and the game had only just begun. The ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel gleamed with chandeliers and polished marble, the kind of place where Silicon Valley kings shook hands under soft jazz and too much champagne. Reporters buzzed near the entrance, eager for a quote, while venture capitalists in bespoke suits traded whispers like stock tips. Ethan Cole hated these events. They were distractions, theater for people who cared more about appearances than outcomes. But tonight, he had no choice. Arcton Group was unveiling their new West Coast headquarters, and his board demanded that Hamoa's CEO make a show of strength. He adjusted his cufflinks, jaw tight as he stepped into the room. Heads turned, conversations paused. Ethan had that. FX 6'3", dark hair perfectly in place, the kind of presence that carried power even without a word. And then he saw her, Samantha Vance. She stood near the center of the room, speaking with 2 investors, a flute of champagne balanced delicately in her hand. The years had only sharpened her. The red dress she wore was bold without being loud, her hair swept back in a style that whispered sophistication, and her eyes, same storm-grey eyes that once looked at him with fire, met his across the ballroom. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the ground tilt. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, only raised her glass slightly, like a fencer saluting before a duel. Ryan Blake leaned closer. "You don't have to, I do." Ethan's voice was iron. He crossed the floor. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing the electricity crackling between them. When he stopped before her, the air seemed to hold its breath. "Ms. Vance," Ethan said, his tone clipped, professional, though his pulse hammered beneath the calm. "Mr. Cole," her voice was smooth, cool as silk. "Didn't expect to see you here. You've never cared much for cocktail diplomacy." "I go where I need to," Ethan replied. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Especially when my company's future is at stake." Samantha tilted her head, lips curving just enough to suggest amusement. Future or past? The investors beside her, sensing a private war, made polite excuses and drifted away. Ethan took a step closer. "The documents," he said. "They were leaked from Arcton servers." "Your servers?" For a heartbeat, something flickered in her expression. Then it was gone, replaced by practiced calm. "Careful, Ethan. Accusations can get expensive. You always did know how to make a profit." "Out of damage?" His words cut sharper than intended. Samantha's gaze locked on his unflinching. "And you always did assume betrayal comes from the outside." The room around them faded. The clinking glasses, the music, the chatter, it all blurred into background noise. Only the two of them remained, caught in a duel where every word was a blade. Ethan leaned in, his voice low. 3 years, Samantha. 3 years without a word. You vanish, then suddenly every move I make is in your hands. That doesn't smell like coincidence." Her jaw tightened, but her eyes didn't waver. "Maybe the real coincidence is that the man you trusted most has access to everything you fear losing." Ryan shifted uncomfortably at Ethan's side, but neither of them broke eye contact. "You're playing games," Ethan said. "No, Ethan." Samantha's voice was barely above a whisper, but every syllable cut. "I'm warning you, the enemy isn't me, it's closer than you think." And with that, she stepped back, turning toward another circle of investors, her laughter soft and measured, as if the confrontation had never happened. Ethan stood rooted, the taste of her words lingering, like smoke. His mind raced, replaying every late-night meeting with Ryan, every signature, every document. But his chest burned with something more dangerous than suspicion. 3 years had passed. He should have been immune, but seeing her again, feeling the pull of her presence, Ethan Cole realized with brutal clarity, the war between them wasn't just about business, it was personal. The city was still buzzing when Ethan's black Bentley pulled away from the Fairmont. But inside the car, silence pressed heavy. The night's confrontation replayed in his mind like a broken reel. Samantha's eyes calm but burning, her voice steady as she whispered, "The enemy isn't me. It's closer than you think." Closer, Ethan rubbed his temple, his reflection fractured in the tinted window. Samantha had always been a master at manipulation. Was this another trick? A psychological feint to make him turn inward while she struck from the outside? Or was it the truth? Across from him in the back seat, Ryan Blake scrolled on his phone, his face lit by the pale glow. Efficient, loyal, unshakable Ryan. The man who had worked 70-hour weeks, cancelled vacations, even missed his sister's wedding to stay by Ethan's side during the IPO. And yet, Ryan was also one of the 3 people with access to the merger files. Long night, Ryan said, without looking up. Ethan's gaze lingered on him. For some more than others. Ryan glanced up, brow furrowing slightly. You mean Samantha? Ethan didn't answer. He leaned back, letting the hum of the engine mask the pounding of his thoughts. Back at Hamoa Tower, the building was half asleep, but the 52nd floor was never dark. Ethan walked straight to his office, Ryan trailing behind. The San Francisco skyline sprawled before him, but his eyes went to the files spread across his desk. Printouts, contracts, email chains, each one a reminder of how fragile empires really were. Ryan set down his tablet. Look, Ethan, you know I've got your back. If Arcton wants to play dirty, we'll crush them. PR, litigation, countersuits, we've done it before. Ethan turned, his voice quiet but edged. Funny thing about betrayal, Ryan. It rarely comes from the enemy you're fighting. Ryan blinked, then gave a short, humorless laugh. You think Jesus, Ethan. After all these years, Ethan held his stare. He didn't want to believe it, but Samantha's words gnawed at him. Closer than you think. That night, sleep didn't come. Ethan sat in his penthouse overlooking the bay, whiskey in hand, the city glittering below. His mind drifted back to 3 years earlier, back to Samantha. He remembered late nights in Palo Alto, the 2 of them hunched over a single laptop, coding side by side. The way she challenged him, refused to be impressed by his money, pushed him harder than anyone else ever dared. And he remembered the morning she was gone. No fight, no explanation, just silence. He buried the wound under expansion plans, capital raises, board meetings. He told himself he was stronger without her, but tonight, seeing her again, he realized the wound had never closed. His phone buzzed. An encrypted message. No sender ID. Ethan's pulse quickened as he opened it. One sentence glared back at him. Check the boardroom cameras. 2 nights ago, Ethan's grip tightened around the glass. Whoever sent the message knew something. Knew where to point him. He set the whiskey down and stood, a storm hardening in his chest. If Samantha was playing him, he'd bury her company in lawsuits and acquisitions until nothing remained. But if she was telling the truth, someone inside Hamoa was the leak, then Ethan Cole would burn the traitor out, no matter the cost. And as the night stretched over San Francisco, one thing became clear. This wasn't just business anymore. This was war. The security office at Hamoa Tower wasn't designed for COOs. No mahogany desks, no panoramic views, just cold fluorescent light and walls lined with screens. Ethan Cole stood in the doorway, his tailored suit out of place among the hum of servers and the smell of burnt coffee. Mr. Cole, the night shift guard, nearly jumped to his feet. We weren't expecting pull the boardroom footage, Ethan said, cutting him off. His voice carried no emotion, but it didn't need to. Men like Ethan weren't questioned. The guard swallowed, fingers flying across the keyboard. Which day? 2 nights ago. Midnight. The screens flickered, then filled with grainy black and white images of the boardroom empty chairs. A long glass table gleaming under dim lights. For a moment, nothing. Then the door opened. Ethan's jaw tightened. Ryan Blake walked in. On screen, his chief of staff moved with the ease of someone who knew he shouldn't be there, but also knew the security team wouldn't stop him. Ryan sat at the table, pulled out a laptop, and connected a flash drive. The timestamp glowed on the corner of the screen. 12:14 a.m. Ethan's pulse hammered. The guard frowned. "Should I keep going?" "Play it," Ethan ordered. Ryan typed quickly, transferring files. He leaned back, checked his phone, then glanced around the empty room. A small smile flickered across his face before he pocketed the drive, closed the laptop, and slipped out. Ethan's hands curled into fists. 7 years. 7 years of loyalty, of shared victories, of late nights. Building Hamoa from a half-broken startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire. And here, in grainy monochrome, was the man he trusted most stealing from him like a common thief. But the footage wasn't done. At 12:37 a.m., the door opened again. A woman entered, her hair pulled back, face shadowed by the poor angle. She wasn't supposed to be there either. She walked to the table, sat exactly where Ryan had been, and set down her phone. The glow lit her features. Ethan's stomach dropped. Samantha Vance. She looked tired, wary, but focused. She placed her phone on the table, pressed record, and began flipping through documents Ryan had left behind. Her lips moved, reading quietly into the recorder. Then she gathered a few sheets, slid them into a folder, and left as quickly as she had come. Ethan froze. The guard hesitated. "Sir, do you want me to stop?" The room went still, except for the low hum of servers. Ethan replayed the last minute in his head. Ryan copying files. Samantha arriving after, recording, taking documents. Was she covering her tracks, collecting evidence, or was she part of it all along? The guard shifted nervously. "Do you want me to log this in the system?" Ethan turned, eyes colder than steel. "No, this never leaves this room." He walked out, his footsteps echoing against the concrete floor, back in his office. The city stretched beneath him like a glittering chessboard. Ethan poured a glass of scotch, the amber liquid trembling slightly in his hand. Two truths stared him down. Ryan Blake had betrayed him. That much was undeniable. The footage was clear. But Samantha Vance, her role was blurred, shrouded in questions. If she was guilty, why risk coming back? Why confront him at the Fairmont, warning him about a traitor? Unless she was telling the truth, unless she was trying to protect him. Ethan downed the scotch in one swallow, the burn sharp against his throat. His empire was bleeding, his trust fractured, and his heart was caught in a war between the woman who left him and the man who'd stood by his side. He set the glass down hard, the sound cracking through the silence. This wasn't just a leak anymore. It was a conspiracy, and Ethan Cole was done playing defense. The next morning, Hamoa Tower pulsed with its usual rhythm assistants, rushing between meetings. Analysts glued to screens, the hum of ambition filling every corner. But on the 52nd floor, a storm brewed behind closed doors. Ethan Cole sat at the head of the conference table, his posture razor straight, a file folder resting untouched before him. The city glittered through the glass wall behind him, but his eyes never left the man across the table. Ryan Blake. Ryan looked tired, though he hid it well, a crisp navy suit, tie perfectly knotted. He offered the practiced half-smile that had charmed investors and smoothed over crises for years. "You wanted to see me," Ryan said lightly, settling into his chair. Ethan's voice was calm to calm. "2 nights ago, midnight, you were in the boardroom." Ryan blinked, feigning confusion. Boardroom at midnight. "Ethan, I was home. You know I leave my badge with security after hours." Ethan slid the folder across the table. Inside were stills pulled from the security footage, grainy black and white images of Ryan at the glass table. A flash drive in hand. The smile faltered. Ryan leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "So you've been checking tapes?" "I don't like surprises," Ethan said. His words cut like glass. For a long moment, Ryan said nothing. Then he clasped his hands together, resting them on the table. "Look, Ethan, I know how this looks, but you need to understand, I wasn't selling us out. I was protecting us. Protecting us." Ethan's laugh was short, humorless. "By siphoning classified files onto a flash drive in the middle of the night." Ryan's voice lowered, urgent now. "There are people on the board who don't trust you anymore. They think you've been reckless with the merger. I was asked to keep a backup insurance." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Which people?" Ryan shook his head. "Does it matter?" "You've made enemies, Ethan. More than you realize." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Ethan studied him, searching for cracks in the mask. He'd known Ryan for years, trusted him through wars in the boardroom, through firestorms, in the press, and yet the footage didn't lie. But neither did the echo of Samantha's warning. "The enemy isn't me. It's closer than you think." Ethan leaned forward. "And what about her?" Ryan's brows furrowed. "Her who?" Ethan's gaze sharpened. "Samantha. She was in that boardroom, too." A flicker barely there crossed Ryan's face. Surprise, guilt, or something else entirely. "She's playing you," Ryan said quickly. "Always has. She's using you as a shield while she buries her mower. You can't see it because you're still hung up on her." The accusation landed harder than Ethan expected. He gripped the armrest, forcing control back into his voice. "Careful, Ryan. I'm not wrong," Ryan pressed. "She walked away, Ethan. She left you bleeding, and now she's back just when your empire is on the line. You think that's fate, that's strategy." The words stung because they carried truth. But beneath them, Ethan heard something else, a note of desperation. "Tell me what was on that drive," Ethan demanded. Ryan hesitated, then leaned in, lowering his voice as if the walls themselves might be listening. "Enough to bury you if it landed in the wrong hands." The admission hit like ice water. Ethan rose slowly, the weight of betrayal anchoring every step. "Get out," he said, his voice low. Final. Ryan stood, smoothing his suit jacket. For the first time in years, his smile was gone. "You're making a mistake, Ethan. You can't fight everyone at once." Ethan's eyes were steel. "Watch me." Ryan left, the door clicking shut behind him. Ethan exhaled, his pulse still racing. He turned to the city beyond the glass, but his reflection stared back, a man surrounded by enemies, unable to tell which one would strike next. Ryan Blake had betrayed him. That much was certain. But Samantha Vance, her shadow still lingered. Ally, enemy, or something far more dangerous. Ethan pressed his palms against the glass, the city glittering beneath him like a battlefield. The war for Hamoa had begun. The following week, the world outside Hamoa Tower remained oblivious. Stock tickers rolled on CNBC. Bloggers speculated about tech valuations, and venture capitalists still lined up to throw money at the next unicorn. But inside Ethan Cole's empire, every step was measured, every glance weighed. He had decided to stop waiting for answers. He would create them. Late one night, Ethan summoned his most trusted engineer, a quiet woman named Carla Nguyen, who had built half of her encryption protocols. Only she and Ethan knew what they were about to stage. "I want a document," Ethan said, leaning over her desk. "Something that looks like the crown jewel. Numbers, projections, even a fake acquisition target. It has to look real, enough to tempt anyone." Carla hesitated. "And if it leaks?" "That's the point," Ethan replied. His voice was steel. "We'll know exactly who took the bait." By dawn, the trap was set. A file labeled Project Horizon. It looked like a $3 billion expansion into Asia, complete with forged board approvals and sealed contracts. The file lived on a single secure drive, accessible only by Ethan, Ryan, and Samantha through the back channel Arcton, still used during merger negotiations. 3 suspects. 1 bait. The next 48 hours stretched like weeks. Ethan moved through his dayboard meetings, investor calls, press interviews with the mask of control firmly in place. But underneath, every nerve was taut. Ryan still carried himself like the loyal lieutenant, handing Ethan briefs, whispering reminders before calls. Yet Ethan noticed the flickers Ryan's eyes darting toward closed doors, his phone lighting up at odd hours. And then there was Samantha. She requested another private meeting, this time at a quiet rooftop bar overlooking the bay. "I don't drink," Ethan said as he arrived, though he took the bourbon she ordered anyway. Samantha studied him across the table, the city lights painting silver across her features. "You're quieter than usual, which means you're planning something." Ethan didn't answer. He took a slow sip, letting the burn cover the tension. "You still don't trust me," she said softly. "Even after everything I told you." "You warned me," Ethan admitted. "But warning and truth aren't the same thing." Her gaze hardened. "And you still can't decide whether I'm your enemy or the only person willing to stand against the people trying to gut your company." "Maybe you're both," Ethan said. For a moment, their silence carried all the weight of their shared past late nights coding, whispered promises, the abrupt rupture that had never healed. Finally, Samantha leaned forward, her voice low. "Whoever it is, Ethan, they won't stop until you're out. You need to decide who you can stand with before it's too late." Ethan studied her, searching for cracks in the mask. But Samantha Vance was unreadable. The answer came the next morning. Carla stormed into Ethan's office, eyes wide. It leaked. Project Horizon, a blogger in New York, posted details at 6 a.m. Ethan's chest tightened, though he forced calm. "Who accessed the file?" Carla handed him the log. 3 names, but one stood out, highlighted in red. Ryan Blake. 2:13 a.m. Ethan stared at the timestamp. He could picture Itrian in the boardroom again, the quiet hum of servers, the glint of a flash drive, his jaw clenched. 7 years of loyalty, 7 years of trust, all of it undone in a single line of code. But even as rage coursed through him, another detail caught his eye. At 2:19 a.m., just 6 minutes later, another login appeared. This one from the Arcton channel. Samantha Vance. Ethan's pulse hammered. Ryan had pulled the file, but Samantha had seen it almost immediately. Was she tracking him, protecting him, or was she still in the game? The trap had worked, but the answers were more tangled than before. That night, Ethan stood at the window of his penthouse, the bay glistening below. He held the log file in one hand, the city in the other. Ryan Blake was guilty. That much was undeniable. But Samantha Vance, she remained the question that haunted him most. And as he stared into the dark horizon, Ethan Cole made a silent vow. The next move would be his dot, And when the trap finally closed, no one ally or enemy would escape unscathed. The boardroom of Hamoa Tower was a cathedral of glass and steel, 30 feet of table polished to a mirror shine. Leather chairs aligned with military precision, and the San Francisco skyline stretched like a crown behind them. This was where power moved in whispers and signatures, where fortunes rose and careers died. This morning, it felt like a courtroom. Ethan Cole sat at the head of the table. The log file from Project Horizon clipped neatly in a folder before him. Around the table, 12 directors murmured among themselves, tension buzzing like static. Ryan Blake sat 3 seats down, posture straight, eyes calm, though a sheen of sweat glistened at his temple. "Let's come to order," Ethan said, his voice even but sharp. The chatter died instantly. He slid the folder into the center of the table. 2 nights ago, a classified file, Project Horizon, was accessed and leaked. Only 3 people had clearance. The logs show one name. He flipped the page. Ryan's login appeared in black and white, time-stamped 2:13 a.m. A ripple spread across the table. Directors shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. Ryan leaned forward, voice controlled. "This is a mistake. Yes, I accessed the file, but I did it under directive from members of this very board. They wanted oversight, insurance. I was following orders." Several faces turned pale, others hardened. The room thickened with implication. Ethan's eyes locked on Ryan. "Are you accusing the board of conspiracy against the company they swore to protect?" Ryan spread his hands. "I'm saying loyalty isn't a one-way street. You've made enemies, Ethan, some in this room. They don't trust your leadership anymore. And he paused, letting the words hang, was caught. In the middle, the directors shifted again, whispers rising. Ethan felt the current turning. Ryan wasn't denying the leak. He was dragging the board into the mud with him. Then the door opened. Every head turned as Samantha Vance walked in, heels striking the floor like a gavel. She wore a black suit, hair pulled tight, her expression cool as marble. "This is a closed session," one director protested. Samantha's smile was razor thin. "And yet, you all seemed very interested in me last week when Arcton's name hit the press. If you're going to discuss my involvement, I prefer to be in the room." Ethan's chest tightened, but he said nothing. He wanted to see where this went. Samantha set a slim folder on the table. "You're all debating Ryan Blake's actions, but perhaps you'd like to see what he was really doing with that flash drive." Ryan stiffened. She opened the folder, sliding out printed screenshots, email trails, financial transfers, encrypted chats. These came from a secondary server Arcton intercepted. They show Ryan funneling data not to the board, not even to me, but to a private equity group in New York. A competitor preparing a hostile bid for Hamoa. Gasps broke out. Chairs shifted. Ryan's face drained of color. "This is fabricated." "She's framing me," but Samantha cut him off, her voice slicing the air. "Fabricated? Then why does this account trace directly to a Cayman shell registered under your name?" Ethan's fists tightened on the table. It all aligned now: the late-night access, the unexplained meetings, the smug calm. Ryan hadn't just betrayed him. He'd been selling their empire piece by piece. The board erupted in whispers, the balance of power shifting like sand. Ryan slammed his fist on the table. "You can't prove," but Ethan's voice cut him dead. "I don't need to. You're finished." Security entered, summoned by a silent signal. Ryan's eyes darted around the room, then landed on Ethan with a look of something between rage and heartbreak. "You'll regret this," Ryan hissed as they pulled him from the room. "You think she's saving you, Ethan. She's not. She'll destroy you." The doors slammed shut behind him. Silence fell heavy. The directors exchanged uneasy looks. For once, Ethan didn't care. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. Samantha gathered. Her folder, her gaze meeting his across the table. Her expression revealed nothing, no triumph, no malice. Only the steady calm of someone who had just shifted the entire game. And Ethan Cole knew, with a certainty that chilled him, Ryan was gone. But the war was far from over, because Samantha Vance wasn't just part of this game. She was playing it better than anyone. Ethan had expected the boardroom to be a battlefield, but the silence that followed Ryan's departure felt like the calm before the storm. The directors sat frozen in their seats, their faces a mix of shock and uncertainty, as though the foundations of Hamoa had just shifted beneath them. But Ethan wasn't focused on them. He didn't care about the whispers, the looks, or the implications. His eyes were fixed on the woman who had just exposed everything, the woman who had been a ghost in his life for 3 years, and now was standing right in front of him, clearer than ever before. Samantha Vance. She hadn't moved since Ryan was escorted out. Her expression was unreadable. Her hands folded neatly on the table as though nothing extraordinary had just occurred. Ethan didn't waste a second. He stood and walked towards her, each step deliberate. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but it didn't matter. This wasn't about Hamoa anymore. This wasn't about strategy or the boardroom. It was about her. "Why did you do it?" Ethan's voice was low, but fierce. The words had been eating away at him since the moment she walked in. "Why risk everything to help me? After everything, what you did to me?" Samantha's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't do it for you, Ethan." Her voice was steady, but her eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite place. "I did it for the company, for Hamoa," Ethan scoffed, disbelief creeping into his tone. "Don't lie. You've always been a master at manipulation. Samantha, you knew exactly what you were doing, coming back into my life like this." She finally moved, standing up slowly, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "If I wanted to manipulate you, I would have done it years ago." She stepped closer, and for the first time since their confrontation, Ethan saw a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "I came back because I had no choice. Hamoa was always going to be more than just a company to me, Ethan. It was the reason I got into this in the first place." Ethan was silent, his mind racing. The old feelings started to creep into anger, the confusion, the resentment. But beneath it all, there was something else, something that had never really gone away. "You think I'm the enemy, don't you?" Samantha continued, her voice softer now. "You think I came back to destroy you, to tear everything apart. But the truth is, I never stopped caring about this company, and I never stopped caring about you." Ethan shook his head, his jaw clenched. "You don't get to say that after what you did. You walked away. You left me without a word, without a trace." His chest tightened as the old wounds reopened. "And then you come back, pretending like you can just play savior, like you never abandoned everything we had." Samantha stepped closer again, but this time she didn't back down. Her voice was fierce but measured. "I didn't leave because I didn't care, Ethan. I left because I couldn't stay. I couldn't watch you destroy yourself and the company for the wrong reasons. You were obsessed with power. You still are. The words hit harder than any of the accusations he'd thrown at her. Samantha had always been the one to call him on his bullshit, even when it hurt. And damn it, it hurt now. You think I did this for power? Ethan's voice cracked, but he quickly regained his composure. What would you know about it? You walked away from everything we built, everything I built. Samantha's face softened, but her eyes held steady. That's the problem, Ethan. You think it was just yours. You were so focused on building your empire that you lost sight of everything that mattered. And when I tried to show you, tried to warn you, you didn't listen. Ethan stood frozen. It was like she had just peeled back all the layers he had built around himself, and what was left was raw and exposed. The reality of what he had lost, what he still could lose. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their shared history hung between them, thick and heavy. Samantha, the woman who had once been the light in his life, now felt like a stranger. But she wasn't. She never had been. I can't keep doing this, Ethan said finally, his voice quieter now, tinged with resignation. I can't keep pretending I don't feel anything when I see you. When I hear you. Samantha took a step back, her eyes softening. And I can't keep saving you, Ethan. You have to save yourself. If you want Hamoa to survive, you have to stop clinging to everything that's holding you back. Ethan's breath caught. It felt like a final blow, the kind that could end everything. But somehow, he didn't feel angry. He just felt empty, like the world had shifted beneath him, and he was still standing there, trying to catch up. Why did you come back? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Samantha didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, as if she was searching for the right words. Then she spoke softly, because I never stopped loving this place. And because, despite everything, I never stopped loving you. Ethan blinked, the weight of her words sinking in. They were both broken, both scarred, but the truth was undeniable. There was something between them, something neither time nor distance had erased. Samantha turned to leave, but stopped at the door. She didn't look back. Make your choice, Ethan, before it's too late. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Ethan alone in the silence. The city outside felt miles away, and for the first time in years, he felt small. The game had changed, and now Ethan Cole had to decide which side of it he wanted to be on. Ethan stood in front of the glass wall of his penthouse, staring out at the lights of the city. Below, San Francisco pulsed with life, every flicker, every movement, a reminder of what he had built and lost. The past few days had been a blur. After the showdown with Ryan, the board had demanded action. They were scared. Hamoa's empire was under threat, both from external forces and from within. The leaks, the betrayal, the whispers of a hostile takeover, all of it had the potential to undo everything Ethan had worked for. But there was something else gnawing at him, Samantha. He had never stopped thinking about her. Not truly, she had. Walked away from him once, and he had buried the pain deep within the walls of his office, his business, his success. But seeing her again, hearing her voice, feeling the intensity of what had once been had brought everything back. She hadn't just been a lover. She had been his equal, his partner. She had challenged him in ways no one else had, and when she left, it felt like a piece of him had gone with her. Now she was back, and not just as an ally, not just as someone offering him a lifeline. She was back as a force of nature, a reminder of the man he used to be and the man he could still become. But there was a problem. Ethan Cole had always believed in one thing. control, the relentless pursuit of it. But control had never been easy with Samantha. She was too fierce, too independent, too unafraid to challenge him. And maybe that's what he had loved about her. But now, standing on the edge of everything he had worked for, he wondered had he been chasing control at the expense of everything else. The door to his office opened, and Ryan Blake stepped in, looking grim. "Ethan," Ryan said, his voice tight, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "I need to talk to you." Ethan didn't turn to face him. "I know what you're going to say." Ryan shifted, uneasy. "I've been through hell, man. You know that. But I'm still loyal to you. I always have been. I know I made a mistake. I've already lost everything. But I can make this right. I can help you take back control of this company." Ethan turned slowly, meeting Ryan's eyes. He wasn't sure what he saw there: guilt, desperation, or something else. "You had your chance," Ethan said, his voice cold. "You crossed a line, Ryan, and there's no going back from that." Ryan's face fell. "Please, Ethan, you know what it's like. I was just trying to protect you, to protect us. But if you don't act now, we're finished." Ethan felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. Ryan was right about one thing: Hamer was on the edge. If Ethan didn't act quickly, it would all slip through his fingers. But then there was Samantha. She had warned him. She had told him the truth, even when he didn't want to hear it. She was right. Ethan was too focused on power, on control, and it had cost him everything. He had pushed people away, Samantha, his own team, and for what? The weight of his choices felt unbearable. Ryan looked at him, desperate. "Ethan, please, we're family. You can't do this alone. You need me." Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze narrowing. "Family," his voice hardened. "I've had enough of people telling me what I need. I don't need you, Ryan, and I don't need to cling to the past." The silence in the room stretched, thick and suffocating. "Get out," Ethan said, "and don't come back." Ryan's face twisted with something between hurt and anger. "You'll regret this, Ethan. You won't win this without me." "But..." Ethan didn't flinch. "I've been doing just fine without you." Ryan stood still for a long moment, as if considering whether to say something else. But instead, he simply nodded and walked out of the office. Ethan exhaled, letting the tension seep out of his body. The next day, Ethan stood alone in the conference room, a folder of documents in front of him. This time, there was no escape from the decision he had to make. He needed to choose between holding on to the legacy he had built, or taking the risk of rebuilding everything with Samantha by his side. His phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from her. "You've made your choice, Ethan. You always do." He stared at the screen for a long moment, and then, without a second thought, he hit reply. "Let's rebuild it together." The first days after Ethan's decision were a blur. There was no fanfare, no sudden wave of relief, just the quiet realization that everything had shifted. The air in the office felt different, as if the very walls of Hamoa were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Ethan sat at his desk, reviewing the numbers, again projections, balances, potential investments. Hamoa was on the edge, but it wasn't finished. Not yet. Samantha had arrived the night before, taking a seat at the opposite end of the long conference table. The room felt charged with an unspoken agreement between them. No more games, no more egos. "Hamoa was never just my company," Ethan said, his voice hoarse with determination. "It was ours, even when you walked away. Samantha nodded, her expression unreadable, but her eyes were steady. I walked away because you were destroying yourself in this companion, the name of power. You need to learn that you can't control everything, Ethan. Ethan ran his hand through his hair. I know that now. I've learned the hard way. She smiled slightly, not with sympathy, but with understanding. You're not the only one who's made mistakes. The only thing left to do is fix them. Together, they began the long process of rebuilding. Samantha led the charge on the restructuring plan, cutting ties with outdated projects, renegotiating with investors, and rebuilding Hamoa's brand. But it wasn't just about finances. It was about trust. The trust that had been shattered. Not only by Ryan's betrayal, but by Ethan's own obsession with control. A week later, they sat in the boardroom, facing the remaining members of the Hamoa board. Ethan felt the weight of their eyes on him. Some of them still looked unsure. Others, like Janet, had already turned their backs. We've been through hell and back, Ethan began, his voice steady but carrying the gravitas of a man who had learned the cost of losing everything. But Hamoa isn't just about the numbers. It's about the people. And that's why, from this moment forward, this company will rebuild itself from the inside out. No more secrets. No more shortcuts. Samantha sat beside him, her presence commanding but supportive. We're launching a new initiative, a transparency overhaul. Every contract, every investment, every deal will be available to the board and to our employees. This is a company for all of us, not just a few. One of the directors, an older man with thinning hair, cleared his throat. That's a big leap, Ethan. You're asking us to trust you again. Ethan's gaze never faltered. You don't have a choice. The alternative is watching this company crumble from the inside out. And we both know what that feels like. Samantha added, her voice calm but firm. If you want to move forward, we all need to be on the same page. No more lies, no more games. The room was quiet for a long moment. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a step. And for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like they were moving in the right direction. The next few days were a whirlwind. Samantha spent hours on the phone with investors, negotiating deals, while Ethan met with his department heads, ensuring that the restructuring plans were in motion. Every decision felt critical, every conversation an opportunity to solidify their new foundation. But the weight of rebuilding wasn't just on the business side. One evening, after the office had emptied out, Ethan and Samantha stood by the window. Again, the view was almost identical to the one he had stood in front of months ago, but now, the city seemed less like a battlefield and more like a canvas waiting to be painted. Samantha crossed her arms, her eyes on the skyline. I know you're still wondering if you made the right choice. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He had been wondering that every minute of every day since their decision. The cost of Hamoa's rebirth wasn't just financial, it was personal. It was about letting go of control, letting go of the obsession that had driven him to the edge. I've never been more unsure of anything in my life, Ethan said, finally breaking the silence. But I know one thing, we can't keep pretending. I can't keep pretending that power is the only thing that matters. Samantha glanced at him, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Maybe that's the first step to real power, Ethan chuckled softly, the tension easing from his shoulders. Maybe it is. They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision settling into something lighter. Something real. The world outside still spun, fast and loud, but inside this moment, inside the walls of Hamoa, Ethan Cole felt like he was finally standing on solid ground again. The rebuilding had only just begun, but now, for the first time in a long time, it felt like they could do it, together. It had been 2 weeks since the board meeting, and Hamoa was starting to show signs of recovery. The transparency initiative was underway, new contracts were being signed, and the press had caught wind of Ethan and Samantha's bold strategy, but every victory felt small, temporary, like a building block in a foundation still cracking. Ethan stood at the head of the long conference table once again, this time with a different kind of weight pressing on his chest. He'd been preparing for this moment all week. The invitation had come in the form of a quiet, almost imperceptible threat. Ogden Group had decided to make their move. Samantha entered the room, her face as unreadable as always, but there was something in the way she walked, the way she met his eyes, steady, unflinching. "We're in this together," she said softly as she took a seat beside him. "No matter what happens." Ethan gave a brief nod. He needed her, not just as a business partner, but as someone who could read him better than anyone else. The door opened and Jonathan Richards, CEO of Ogden Group, stepped in with the kind of confidence that made men like Ethan squirm in their seats. Richards was sharp, brilliant, even, and always had a talent for turning the tables in his favor. Behind him, his team lawyers, financial advisors, the works piled in, taking up the seats around the table like soldiers preparing for a fight. Ethan's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay composed. This wasn't about who could talk louder or stronger. This was about who had the fortitude to see the fight through. Richards gave a polite nod, but his eyes stayed sharp, calculating. "Ethan, Samantha, I see you've made some changes around here." His voice was smooth, almost too smooth, like he already knew the game was his to win. "We're adapting to the times." "Jonathan," Ethan said, his tone equally measured. "Change is necessary for survival." Samantha crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You've been circling us for months, Jonathan. What's the play today?" Richard smiled, charming, but a little too cold. "I'm not here for games, Samantha. I'm here to offer you a seat at the table, a partnership. Hamoa is ripe for a hostile takeover, and I think you know that as well as I do." The words hit harder than Ethan expected. Hostile takeover. It was exactly what they had feared. Ethan sat up straighter. "And why should we consider this, Jonathan? What's your angle?" Richards leaned forward, eyes gleaming with an almost predatory intensity. "Because, Ethan, you and Samantha have been fighting fires. You're rebuilding, but you're still vulnerable. The market is unstable, and Hamoa doesn't have the firepower it once did. Not without us." Samantha's jaw tightened. She was watching him closely, calculating. "And what do you want from us in return?" Richards chuckled softly. "A seat at the board, full access to your future contracts, financial reports. We bring stability to Hamoa." He paused, his smile widening. "And we could make a very profitable alliance. You'd have the power to reshape the industry." Ethan turned his gaze to Samantha. They didn't have to say a word. They were thinking the same thing. Richards was offering them a chance to escape the storm, to let someone else shoulder the burden. But that wasn't the path they had chosen. "Let me get this straight," Ethan said, cutting through the silence. "You think we'd throw away everything we've worked for and hand you control of this company?" Richards didn't flinch. "It's not about control, Ethan. It's about survival. And if you don't make a move now, Hamoa will be buried in the market. I'll ensure your stock plummets. You'll be irrelevant." Samantha leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "You're underestimating us. We're rebuilding, Jonathan, and we're not going to let you waltz in here and take what's ours." The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan could feel the weight of every word they exchanged. Richards had laid his cards on the table, and now they were left with a choice: concede and join forces, or fight back with everything they had. Ethan turned to Samantha, his gaze unwavering. "We don't need them. We've got the resources. We've got the heart. We can rebuild Hamoa on our terms." Samantha smiled, the kind of smile that came from years of trusting someone who would never back down. "Exactly. This isn't just about money, Jonathan. It's about trust. And we're not going to hand that over." Richard's smile faltered just for a moment. He stood, gathering his things. "This isn't over, Ethan. I'll be back, and when I am, you'll wish you'd taken the deal." As he walked out, Ethan and Samantha remained in their seats. Neither of them spoke at first. They didn't need to. They both knew that this was just the beginning of a much bigger fight. But for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a sense of clarity. This was his company. This was their company. And they were going to protect it. Together. The morning after the showdown with Jonathan Richards, Ethan Cole sat in his office, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but the numbers in front of him were a blur. Despite the confident front he had shown in the boardroom, his mind was racing. Arcton had already begun circulating rumors about Hamoa's imminent collapse. Stocks were volatile, and investors were pulling back. Richards had played the market like a violin, using every tool in his arsenal to weaken their position. But there was something worse, brewing, something he hadn't anticipated. A text buzzed on his phone. It was from Janet Hargrove, one of the senior board members who had supported him through the early days of Hamoa. "We need to talk." Ethan felt the weight of the message. Janet had always been a rock for him, but lately her silence had grown deafening. Was she beginning to doubt him, too? He had no time to waste on uncertainty. 20 minutes later, Janet stepped into his office, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She was an older woman, sharp-featured, her grey hair pulled back in a tight bun. She carried herself with the grace of someone who had been through the trenches and emerged victorious every time. But today, her face was clouded with doubt. "I assume this is about the offer from Arcton?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. Janet didn't waste time. "It's not just that, Ethan. You've put all of us in a tough position. You've alienated half the board by refusing the deal. The stock price is plummeting. Investors are beginning to back out. And now Richards is threatening a hostile takeover." Ethan stood, his jaw clenched. "I know exactly what he's doing, but I won't let him have Hamoa. This is my company, our company." Janet's gaze softened, but her voice remained firm. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about all of us. If you keep pushing back like this, you'll lose everything: Hamoa, your reputation, your trust in this industry." Ethan's pulse quickened. "So you think we should just give in? Hand over control?" "No, Ethan," she said, her tone almost resigned. "But you have to make a decision. You can't keep fighting this alone. You need allies." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. Allies. He had already pushed Ryan away, and now it seemed like even the people closest to him were turning their backs. He had to make a choice: take the deal with Arcton or risk losing it all. But then, he remembered what Samantha had said. We can rebuild it, together. His eyes flickered to the window, the city sprawling before him, like a puzzle he wasn't sure how to solve. Later that day, Samantha and Ethan met in his office. The atmosphere between them was tense, but familiar, on understanding that only years of partnership and shared history could foster. We're running out of time, Samantha said, leaning against the table. Richards is going to push harder, and we both know that if we don't act, this company is done. Ethan didn't speak immediately. His mind was racing, torn between two choices. What if we're making the wrong choice? He finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. Samantha raised an eyebrow, surprised by the vulnerability in his words. What do you mean? I've been so focused on fighting back, on keeping control, that I've lost sight of everything else. Maybe we should just sell. Let Richards take over and move on. Samantha stood tall, her posture shifting. You really think that's the right move? Letting someone else take the reins just because it's easier? I'm not doing this for myself, Ethan. I'm doing it for Hamoa, and for you. Ethan's breath hitched. For me. She met his gaze, her voice unwavering. Yes, for you. You're so focused on winning that you've forgotten why you started this in the first place. You wanted to change things, to create something real. Hamoa was never just a company to you. It was your vision. The weight of her words hit him like a sledgehammer. He'd been so consumed by fear of losing control, fear of being vulnerable, that he'd forgotten why he started in the first place. He wasn't just building an empire for himself. He was building something that mattered. Do you believe in me? He asked quietly. Samantha didn't hesitate. I've always believed in you. The next morning, Ethan walked into the boardroom. With a new resolve, he could feel the weight of the decision settle in his bones. Janet and a few other directors sat around the table, eyes trained on him. I've made my decision, Ethan began, his voice steady. We're not selling, we're not giving up, we're fighting for Hamoa. I'm fighting for Hamoa, and I'm asking all of you to join me. There was silence at first. The weight of his words hung in the air, as though the room was holding its breath. Then, one by one, the directors nodded, their faces softening. Ethan met Samantha's gaze across the table. For the first time in weeks, he felt a surge of clarity. This was the right choice. The war wasn't over. But, for the first time, he felt like he could win it. The morning light shone cold over San Francisco as Ethan Cole walked into the war room. The sleek, glass-walled space had once been a symbol of Hamoa's growing power now. It was the command center for their final battle. Around the table sat the last of the board members loyal to him, each face drawn with tension, eyes glued to the series of charts and projections on the large screen in front of them. The numbers on the screen weren't just data. They were their survival. Time's running out, Ethan said, his voice clear and cutting through the silence. We've been on the defensive long enough. Arcton is playing the long game. But we're done reacting. Today, we take control. Samantha Vance sat at his side, her presence steady and unflinching. Since the moment they'd made their decision, since the night Ethan had decided to stand by his company and by her, they had been moving in sync, every step calculated, every move designed to counter the next one Arcton would make. We know what Richards is planning, Samantha said, her voice confident, commanding. We've intercepted some of his communications. He's preparing to take a majority stake in Hamoa through a shareholder proxy vote. A murmur ran through the room, but Samantha silenced it with a single glance. She turned to the screen and tapped a few keys. A large image of Jonathan Richards appeared, smiling smugly in a corporate advertisement. The face of Arcton's takeover bid. We'll have to make sure that doesn't happen, Samantha continued. We need a counteroffer. We need leverage. Ethan nodded. We have one card left to play. Hamoa's board has always been its strongest asset. If we can secure the votes, we can block any hostile move. The room hummed with a new energy. Ethan felt it with a surge of momentum. They had been fighting Arcton's shadow for months, but now they were ready to face it head-on. Later that day, Ethan and Samantha met with the board members who had remained loyal. They weren't just discussing strategies. They were setting a trap. The majority of their board votes had already been manipulated by Arcton's side, through shareholder proxies and promises of wealth. But they had one chance to flip the scales, and that chance was hanging on Elliot Mason, one of their most influential board members. Elliot had always been a wild-card independent, skeptical of Richards, and someone who valued trust over profit. Ethan sat across from him in a corner office with a view of the bay. Samantha stood next to him, arms crossed, watching their interaction. Closely, Elliot, Ethan said, leaning forward. We need your vote. You're the one who can tip this in our favor. We both know what Richards is doing. If he takes control of Hamoa, everything we've built, everything will be gone. Elliot stroked his chin, his eyes darting between Ethan and Samantha. It's not that simple, Ethan. You know that. I know, Samantha said, her voice calm but firm. But what Richards is offering is a lie. He'll promise you stability, but it will come at the cost of everything we've worked for. You can't let him take over. Elliot's expression hardened. I've been in this industry long enough to know when a man is playing a dangerous game. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and sincere. This isn't a game, Elliot. This is Hamoa. This is our future. You can help us win, or you can let everything fall apart. Elliot remained silent, his gaze flickering to the city beyond the glass. Finally, he spoke. I'll make my decision at the vote. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a rejection. Either it was the opening they needed. That night, the final vote was set. It would determine everything. Hamoa's future, Ethan's future, Samantha's future, and whether Richards would walk away as the victor or be defeated by a company he thought he could control. As they entered the boardroom, Ethan felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. The votes had been cast electronically, but they would count them aloud. This wasn't just a tally. This was a life-or-death moment for Hamoa. Samantha stood beside him, her expression unreadable. She had been his rock, his partner in every sense of the word. If they won this, it would be a new beginning. If they lost, everything they had fought for would be swept away. The vote was announced. The final tally. Elliot Mason's vote was the deciding factor. The room held its breath as the chairman of the board looked down at the final card. The vote is in favor of Hamoa's independence, he said, his voice calm. But the weight of it was felt by everyone. Ethan felt a rush of relief, mixed with disbelief. They had done it. They had fought back, and they had won that night. As the city lights flickered below, Ethan and Samantha stood together at the window of his office, looking out at the sprawling metropolis. The battle was over, but the war for Hamoa's future had just begun. Ethan turned to her, his voice soft but firm. We did it. Samantha smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. We did, but this isn't the end, Ethan. It's just the beginning. He nodded, a sense of finality settling in. Yeah, the beginning of something new. As they looked out at the city, they both knew that while this victory was theirs, there would always be more battles ahead. But now, at least, they would fight them together. The morning after the battle felt strangely empty. Ethan stood in front of his office window. The city of San Francisco sprawled below him. The lights glittered, each one a symbol of progress. But Ethan knew better. Victory wasn't about the lights or the city. It was about what lay ahead, about holding on to everything they had fought for. Hamoa was still standing. For now, but the fight was far from over. Samantha stood beside him, her presence as solid as the city skyline they both stared at. She hadn't said much since the victory. There was no need. They both knew that winning one battle didn't mean the war was won. The real challenge had only just begun. Ethan turned to her, finally breaking the silence. "We did it, didn't we?" His voice was quiet, as if testing the weight of the words. Samantha nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Yes, but this is just the beginning, Ethan. Don't get comfortable." He smiled faintly, a small but genuine acknowledgement. "I know, but for the first time, I feel like we can actually make it." They stood in the quiet for a moment longer, both lost in thought. The city outside was bustling, full of possibility, but inside the walls of Hamoa, there was a palpable shift. The calm before the storm. The door opened with a soft click, breaking the silence. Ethan glanced up. It was a text. A single line of text that made his stomach drop. "I'm not done, Ethan. We'll meet again. Jonathan Richards." He exhaled slowly. Richards. The man wasn't going to back down. Not without a fight. He looked at Samantha, who was already watching him. "What's next?" she asked quietly. Ethan shook his head, the weight of everything they had just fought for still heavy on his shoulders. "I don't know, but I'm ready for whatever comes next." Samantha stood tall, her voice steady and confident. "We're ready. But we need to keep pushing forward, not just for Hamoa, but for everything we believe in." Ethan nodded, the uncertainty in his chest replaced by something strong resolve. They had made it through the first round, but the real test was ahead. He walked over to the window again, staring out at the city as if it held the answers. The future wasn't written yet, but now he knew he wasn't going to face it alone. He had her by his side, and no matter what happened, no matter how the battle unfolded, Ethan knew one thing for sure. He was ready to fight for Hamoa, for Samantha, and for everything they had worked so hard to build. The war wasn't over, but together they'd win it.